So, is there anyone who can put me up tonight? Anyone? Oh, your dog basket. Thanks. It's just me. It's Hubert, my trusty trailer. Darth, my loving rucksack. Wilson, the cuddly little creature. So we come as a kind of package, a kind of family. I want to take you back to the, I'm going to wander up and down, and I'm going to take you back to the 6th of April 2011. Imagine, if you will, you're in the Cramond Brig Inn, just on the north outskirts of Edinburgh. I'm surrounded by a bunch of friends. I've got Lou, I've got Jim, I've got Maggie, I've got my lovely partner Ella, I've got another Jim. Ella's very nervous. She's thinking, what in the name of God are you doing? What you're doing is really crazy. And but I'm prepared. You know, I've got my rucksack, it's packed full of stuff. Just in case Ella gets Jim to take me outside the pub. So I go outside the pub with Jim. He talks to me about something and nothing. Ella sneaks into my rucksack, into my first aid kit, slips £5 in, just in case. And really that's what I've got in my bags. I've got a whole bunch of just in case. It's a whole bunch of stuff that, you know, people might need on the journeys in their lives. And it made me think, hello? Is that somebody knocking? It's the voices. So, what do people need in their lives? What do you guys need in your lives? What's important to you? Money, did I hear? Yeah, money. Love. Stuff. What stuff do you need? A house, did I hear? Families. You need a roof over your head. You need food. What about places like this? Education, cake. And what happens when you leave this place of education? What happens after this? Yeah. Should that be different for people with mental health problems? How might it be different for people with mental health problems? Yeah, self-esteem is a good one. Self-esteem is a good one because it's self-stigma. It's that big finger that points above your head going, you can't.
And I think it's all about how the health professionals also perceive the services.
Yes.
Because they kind of like, we don't label them, kind of like disable them. So then they let them know hope.
Yeah, I agree. I've spoken to a lot of mental health professionals who've talked about services that people are dependent on services, and you think, well, there's not an awful lot of services to be dependent upon. Anyway, just I thought I'd let you have a little think about that and what's important to you. What's important to you is important to me, I guess. So with that in mind, I took my rucksack, which was full of wet weather gear, some water, a phone, my one luxury item, which was a radio, 3 packets of peanut M&Ms, and 10 packets of super noodles. I mean, that I thought this will see me off on my journey. What journey is that? Okay. Just north of Edinburgh, there's a bridge called the Forth Road Bridge. Now, if this had been in the United States have got the Golden Gate Bridge. They like to really state this beautiful bridge. It's a Golden Gate Bridge. In Scotland, this is a bridge that's not too dissimilar to the Golden Gate Bridge. It goes over the Firth of Forth. They call it the Forth Road Bridge. That's it. You know, there's no pomp or ceremony. I'd been walking with some friends at the beginning of my walk, and these people said, "Sorry, Chris, we have to go now. You're on your own." So I'm on my own for the first time. I walk up to the Forth Road Bridge. Now, I've driven over the Forth Road Bridge hundreds of times, thousands of times. But when I put my foot on the Forth Road Bridge, the first thing I noticed is it moves. And I think, this isn't good. I wanted a nice steady bridge, especially if there's water 100 feet down. I want a steady bridge. So I take a few more steps, and then there's a sign. It says, "Distressed, call Samaritans." So obviously I'm put at ease by that. And then there's a bridge, there's a fence just next on the side of the bridge, which is, well, it's inadequate, is what it is. It's about that high. I mean, look at me. An errant gust of wind could blow me off into the water. There's nothing of me. So I'm walking along and I'm looking down, and what do I see? There are gaps in the bridge. That apparently it's for when it's hot and cold, but I can see the water underneath me, 100 feet down, and I'm thinking, this is horrible. So you see people walking towards you, and everybody's walking at the fastest speed they've ever walked, plus 75 miles an hour. It's sort of, isn't it a lovely day? Yes, it's a really lovely day. Yes, a bit windy. Yes. You're completely terrified. So I'm walking over the bridge, and I look down, and the manhole covers are square. God. You obviously don't watch the same children's programs as me. Manhole covers are supposed to be round. If they're round, they don't fall through the hole. If they're square, they fall through the hole. So I'm dodging these manhole covers all over the place. So I finally managed to stagger my way to the other side. All my friends gone. I'm on my own, north of Edinburgh, with my big rucksack on. A bus draws level, and a woman gets off the bus. And she looks at me, a man in a skirt, and says, "What on earth are you doing?" And I suddenly realised this is the first time I've actually explained my situation to somebody who's a non-friend. And I start to babble. So I say, right, okay, I'm walking around the edge of the UK to highlight the experience of people with mental health problems. The reason I'm going around the edge of the UK is because that's where people with mental health problems often feel they are. Okay, so far so good. Okay, I'm a social worker to trade. I've been a social worker for 20 years, and I was sadly disabled out. I was given the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. So I was given 2.5 years psychotherapy, and at the end of the psychotherapy, I thought, I can't go back to social work because that'll drive me nuts. So I thought, well, what can I do? So I had to really retrace my steps. Right to when I was a child. And I thought, what was I good at? What did I like doing? What do I like doing? I thought, well, I like walking, I like talking, I like writing, I like meeting folk. So the other thing I noticed when, as a social worker, I'd gone to my colleagues and said, right, I've been given this diagnosis. Some of them were brilliant. They said, great, Chris, listen, really sorry to hear it, but we'll go out for a drink sometime. But one of my ex-colleagues really stands out for me because I don't know if you've seen Munch's The Scream. Basically, this woman who was a mental health social worker looked at me and I said, I've got borderline personality disorder. She went, really? That's great. Listen, we really ought to catch up someday. Right, cheers. So that was hard. I realised there was a lot of stigma about it. Also at the same time, Radio 4 had put a programme on saying that 80% of people would never invite somebody with a mental health problem into their homes. And I was thinking, well, watch this, I said. So I just, looking at the newspapers as well, things like the Daily Mail, they're saying, the only news about people with mental health problems are like, mentally ill man ate my dog, killed my wife, bit my leg. And I just wanted to have a different story, a different perspective. So I just kept on pouring out to this woman who was very patient. She just stood there thinking, I wish I'd stayed on the bus. And I said, right, the other thing is, a couple of friends of mine, they before I went on the walk, they said, you must read this book by Satish Kumar. Now, Satish Kumar was a Jain monk in the 1960s. And he went on a peace march from India through Pakistan, up through Afghanistan, and all he wanted to do was make a noise about peace. And he went to his guru, and his guru said, "You'll not be taking any money with you." He said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, because if you take money with you, the only people you'll meet will be hoteliers, and you won't be motivated to talk to people at the end of the day." So I thought, if this guy could go from India into Pakistan without being murdered to death, I thought I could walk around the edge of the UK and rely on the people of the UK for hospitality, kindness, and all the kind of lovely squashy stuff. And look at me, I'm starving to death. So this woman says, "Right, you can't stay at my house. My husband is a waitress now, but here's £10. Take this, and there's a pub in the village. Go and get yourself something for tea." So my mind's buzzing. I'm thinking, this woman I've never met before is giving me £10, and I'm thinking, what would Satish Kumar do? Would he accept the money? And I'm thinking, what? So what could have been an easy transaction for just here's £10, me go, cheers, thanks very much. I'm standing there going, it's like I'm frozen to the spot. So I suddenly realised that this is a token of her hospitality further down the line. So I thought, okay, I'll take that £10. So I took the £10 and I went down to the pub in the village. And feeling a bit more happy with myself, I started doing the same spiel in the pub. And I heard a voice in the corner saying, "Keep your £10. I turned around, and there's this woman who turns out she's a social worker. And she says, "I'm going to buy you tea, I'm going to buy you a pint as well, and you are going to listen to my story." So I went, "Oh, okay, let's do that." And suddenly at that point, I realised that this wasn't just about my story. It wasn't about the walk. It wasn't about me talking about the stigma of mental health. Suddenly I realised that there was another purpose to the walk. It was very often people find it difficult to say things to the people they love, to people who are very close to them. And a stranger in a pub is an ideal candidate to pour out your stories. So I'm going to ask you to mix yourselves. I appreciate you're all sitting with your friends and it's all very lovely. I'd like you to find somebody that you don't know very well in the room and have a little chat with them. You don't need to talk about anything. You need to talk to them and listen to them. And I'm going to do the same. I'll find somebody. And I'll give you about, shall we say, 5 minutes? And you'll do it joyfully. Now, I'd had some contact with the the local radio station that day, and I was listening out for the news program because I knew I was going to be on that. And there it was, but unfortunately it had been badly edited. So the news report went something like, "Mentally ill is walking around the edge of the UK." I didn't even have a name. So I was a bit disappointed that we had a laugh. So I walked on, and I got to a point where I decided I can go no further. I didn't have an alternative, so I gave Lou a ring. So Lou picks me up in a car and bundles me back to her house with her partner and her young son, her 4-year-old son. I'm thinking, this is even crazier. You've invited this guy who looks not unlike a bouncer in a skirt, and why? So she said she trusted her first impressions of people, and the thing was, I'd said to her, I have a mental health problem, and I told her that if you're watching CSI Miami, it's usually me that did it. And she still invites me into her home with her son and her partner, and we have a lovely evening. We're chatting away, and we're all friends, and it's delightful. And having a shower and being fed by these just lovely people. So that night on the sofa, I'm lying there and I'm thinking, this really is crazy. This is nuts, mental, schmental, radio rental. It's The fact that I'd walked out of Edinburgh with nothing more than a bag full of what if and a lot of hope. The fact that it's mad that I believed that the people of the UK were going to look after me. It was mad that this woman had invited me in. It was mad that this woman had given me £10. It all felt crazy. The radio station saying, mentally ill is walking around the edge of the UK. And the weather being fantastic. It all felt just, mad, really. So, using my unpolitically correct language, you guys, you've been at college and all that kind of malarkey. What words do you use for somebody with a mental malady? What do you call somebody who's mentally ill? Good man yourself. Unwell. Oh, it's hard, isn't it? Schizophrenic. Say that again.
You want to find out how we call it.
Yeah, how you as a person. A patient. Service user. By the name. Yeah, I quite like by the name. That's one of my favourites. What about the less politically correct ones? Psycho, good. Nutter. Okay, I'm going to read a poem that a friend of mine and I knocked together. I gave him the words and he gave me the poetry. He's a bit more talented than me. I'm good at just insulting folk. He delicately called it Cheese and Crackers. The start of the poem is normally performed by both of us, and he comes at me with a number of insults, and then I respond. Has the cheese slipped off your cracker? Are you howling at the moon? A sandwich short of a picnic, or just a total loon? You're a tube, a spaz, a drongo, a numpty bohead goon, or maybe the village idiot, the laughed at, mocked buffoon. You're just a window licker, a cuckoo asylum slicker. The lights are on, but no one's home. The attic's damp and empty. You're a bam, a biff, whose bus went off a cliff. I respond. Those ugly names are plenty. You point, you laugh, you slander. What is it you think you're seeing? The object of your ridicule is also a human being. I'm just a window licker, a cuckoo asylum slicker. I'm the butt of all your ignorance. You're blind, you cannot see. Let's walk for a mile, swap shoes for a while. Spend a day being me. Be the window licker, the cuckoo asylum slicker. How did that language make you feel? The politically incorrect language, how does that make you feel? Angry? For people who didn't say anything when I was saying come up with the politically incorrect stuff, why didn't you? What's stopping you from going, nutter? You don't want to offend people. Yeah.
Despite the fact that you actually asked us to say it, there's also that, social element like, hey, I can't say it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It is. It's difficult. And I suppose in a group of your peers where you're actually taught political correctness, not to offend, to be with the patient. How do you think that language impacts on me? What do you think I think of it? I can only speak for myself, but I don't give a toss. They are words. You're right. Call me what you like, really. And I can't, like I say, I can't speak for everybody with a mental health problem. But I think if we get tied up in words, what happens is we stop communicating. For example, while I'm walking around the edge of the UK, I will often meet people who will go, hope you don't mind me saying, I think you're a bit mad. So if I took offence every time somebody said, I think you're a bit mad, I'd be stopping the very thing that I was hoping for. This communication, this dialogue. And even if I'm doing it one by one by one, I'm getting more and more people to think about mental ill health. Suddenly people are being presented with somebody who doesn't appear in the Daily Mail, somebody who's not on EastEnders being crazy, but here's a guy who says he's crazy, but he looks kind of normal. The other thing that stood out for me is there are areas where people are very politically correct, like the police. For example, in London, the BBC just recently did a study that if you're black in London, you're half as likely to take drugs, but you're 5 times as likely to be stopped and searched. And after that, you're 5 times more likely, if you're found with drugs, to be arrested. And yet their language is, their politically correct language is exemplary. But it's their behavior, it's their attitudes, the thing that's more difficult to measure, that we're not looking at. So I'm trying to get into attitudes. And as I say, I don't care what you call me what you like, really. Quite like my name occasionally. Baldy Fatso is insulting. So, but yeah, I can deal with most. So where are we? I was at Lewes, and I decided to walk a bit further up the 5 Coastal Path. Now, the 5 Coastal Path is beautiful. It's the sea is mill pond flat. Just imagine. And to your left, you've got gentle hills, and it just makes you feel glad to be alive. Now, there's a problem when you're on a road, on a path, that a lot of people use. Like many astronauts before me, people say to me, what do you do when you need a number 2? Now, the law of the land states you bury it. Does anybody need? Just putting it out there. So anyway, there I was on the 5 Coastal Path, and the urge came upon me. Now, it's a kind of motorway. There's just loads of people. And I was thinking, I can't go. And there's no pubs, no nothing. So I decided to put my tent up and use some gymnastics. I'll just traumatize you with that image. If you wake up screaming tonight, that's my fault. I'd like to apologize. And bagged it up in my nappy bag, and I lay down in bed and started to write my blog. Now I'm blogging away, just thinking what a wonderful world it is, and suddenly I hear this voice outside, and a man shouts, "Hey, no, put that down!" as a dog runs off with my deposit. "Hey, you, come back with that." It's just one of the things that I didn't shout. So I watched this dog savage, and then just really hoped that he wasn't one of those jumpy up licky dogs. So after this man had gone, I cleaned it up as best I could, and that was kind of me. So so I walked on, and I walked on to a place called Crieff. Now, Fife is beautiful. It's got lots of these beautiful little fishing villages along the side, and it's just idyllic. Just go there. Really, it is that lovely. But I had people following me on the internet, and they said you must come and stay with us, and I'll call them the Aussie jocks, because basically they were Scottish, and and Australian all at the same time. And they said, yeah, come and stay with us. That'll be brilliant. I didn't quite make it to their house that day, though. But I was walking along, jaunty style, happy with the world, reflecting on the jobby story, thinking this is great. And I got to this beach, and I met this couple walking towards me, and I said, "Isn't it just a beautiful day? It's stunning, isn't it?" And this man looked up at me and went, "Yeah, it'd be fine if it wasn't for the flies." I thought, right, okay. And I thought, flies, schmize, flies. So I walked along to the beach, and I thought, yeah, it's reached that kind of time of the day where a man puts his tent up and just listens to the sea. And I'm starting to put my tent up, and suddenly they're on me. These flies, they're big black flies, like pterodactyls, are right on top of me, sucking the blood out of me. And I was just dribbling blood everywhere, and they're really sort of soporific flies. They just land on you, they start sucking your blood, and you hit them, and they explode. And so I went into a tent thinking, that was awful, but I had all these bites all over me. It looked like I had chicken pox. And I was thinking, God, he was right about those flies. So the following morning, I was covered in these red welts. I think this is awful. So packed my tent away, and I was fine, I'd been told about the Scottish midge, but these flies, I had no idea what they were. Walked a bit further, and finally got to this lovely place, Crieff, where I met the Aussie jocks. And they welcomed me in like an old friend. And each time this happens, I have to sort of pinch myself. These people don't know me. They are inviting me into the house. And this couple, they had 2 children. And they're inviting this guy, who they had no idea who he was, into their home. So I was ever grateful. So she said, "You've got to have a bath." And I was thinking, a bath, that's fantastic, because I hadn't had a bath since I'd started walking. I was a bit, rancid. So she said, "You've got to have these Dead Sea salts. They're absolutely fantastic. They're really, just soak in the Dead Sea salts and feel fantastic." So I think, this is brilliant. I'm running the bath, the steam's coming up, and I'm looking down, and this is gorgeous. How lucky am I? Dead Sea salts in the bath. Dive in the bath. Dive back out of the bath. Remember that I've had all these bites on me, and all the salt has gone into my wounds. God, did I whine for ages? So walking on, I never thought of this as a sort of physical endeavour. I always saw it as a kind of meeting up with people, chatting to folk, getting on with people. But there are bits of Scotland that are a bit, not very well populated. So I walked on to a place called Peterhead. I don't know if you've heard of it. They call it the Blue Toon, and it's not blue. But I went there, and I was going to be met there by a woman who was very Christian. So I said, not only do I have a mental health problem, but I'm not very Christian. I might be Christian in my actions, but I'm what you would call an atheist. And I thought, this is incredible. This woman is inviting me into her home because it feels that we're kind of polar opposites. So I go back to her house, and the first thing she presents me with is this a great big drawer of goodies, painkillers, creams, potions, and it was just delightful. This woman, again, who I'd never met before, was saying, "Here, have all this stuff." So I helped myself to a few blister plasters and usual stuff, and she fed me Cullen skink. Anyone? Cullen skink, white fish, creamy sauce, onions, fantastic. So she feeds me Cullen skink, and then more Cullen skink, and then some more Cullen skink, and just in case, just while I'm going to bed, Cullen skink. And I'm lying on. They've given me the front room. She and her husband have given me the front room of their house with CSI Miami on a TV, and I'm thinking, this is incredible. So I watched TV until ridiculous o'clock because I hadn't seen the telly for a long time. And this woman comes through in the morning and gives me a full cooked breakfast, followed by Cullen skink. I mean, they obviously thought I was starving to death. We got chatting with the husband. The husband is a skipper on a ship, and he's a fisherman. And when he's not at work, he goes down to the harbour and helps other fishermen with their stuff. You know, he'll fix their nets, he'll help them with their engines, that kind of malarkey. So this particular day, that's what he was away to do. So he's just about to go out the door, and he turns around to his wife and said, "You be careful what you say." I thought, interesting. So he must have been out the door for in excess of 30 seconds, and she wasn't careful what she said. She said, "I know what's wrong with you." I said, that's pretty cool, so do I. She goes, "No, I know what's really wrong with you." I went, "Okay, what's really wrong with me?" She said, you've got demons." I went, "Okay." I said, I think I've got borderline personality disorder." She goes, "No, you've got demons, and you won't be able to get past your demons until you welcome Jesus Christ into your heart." My mind went back to a time when I'd met up with the lovely Lou again, and her friend Jan and her friend Kitty, and we were all having lunch. Now, Jan has ME, Lou has MS, Kitty has MS, and we were doing a show and tell around the dinner table. Lou was laughing about her spongy feet with MS and the fact that she gets to take an awful lot of painkillers, so she's a woman of steel. More on her later. And Jan was telling me about what it's like being a carer for her friend Kitty, who has MS, but also telling me about her ME, where she has to take to her bed for lengthy periods. And then it came round to me, my turn. And I'm thinking, I just, maybe if I just pulled myself together, you know, these guys have got real problems. They've got real illnesses. You know, what's wrong with me? You know, why can't I just be? You know, why can't I just? So I burbled some nonsense, and we all sort of laughed and ate tea. But it was all very unsatisfactory, and I came away thinking, you know, even though I'm out there trying to, you know, batter down on the stigma, I'm battering down on my own stigma. I'm really beating myself up. I got to a place called Stonehaven. I'd convinced myself that this merry walk that I was on had cured me. I'd had 2.5 years of psychotherapy, and I was on a walk, and the world was great. And there I was, suddenly in my tent, and I was mental. And I was suicidal. I wanted to self-harm. I wanted to cut myself. I wanted to punch myself in the face. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, what kind of lunatic, spaz, drongo, borehead, what kind of nutter does that kind of stuff to themselves? You know, what kind of idiot wants to do these things to themselves? And the thing is, I've got a mantra, and it's a mantra that works for me. It may not work for others. Is it will pass. And so that mantra, I start saying that mantra in my head. Now, my main problem now is I dissociate. Dissociation is a very odd thing. It served me well when I was younger and I was being sexually abused. What your mind does this wonderful thing. You know, whatever's going on in your little world, your mind goes, actually, you know, that's too stressful. I'm going to take you to that picture in the wall, and you know, you're just going to exist over here for a while. You're going to feel nothing, and you're going to be okay. So I started dissociating very early on in my life. my mum had died, my dad was an alcoholic, and I was being abused by somebody who I'd gone to for help. And I developed this dissociation thing. So it's very difficult for the people that care for you as well. The lovely Ella, my partner, normally I'm a very cuddly kind of guy. When I'm dissociating, ordinarily what happens is I start looking at my hand because I can't believe my hand's real. And now I look beyond my hand and I can't believe anything else is real. So cognitively, on one hand, I'm thinking, don't be an idiot. But the emotional side is saying, nothing's real. When I put my hand on my partner, she feels like a piece of meat. I am that emotionally detached from her. She just feels alien to me, and which must be incredibly difficult for her. And this dissociation for me can last between an hour and 3 weeks. And at the end of that 3 weeks, I can dip into it again. So it can keep going for far longer than it's welcome. So the other thing about dissociation is, just to describe it further, it's a little bit like, imagine having your head under the water at the swimming pool. And you can hear voices. And you know people are talking, and you know you should be able to understand what they're saying. But it just feels out of reach. So there I was in Stonehaven, crazy, and then back in the room with the lady in Peterhead. And we agreed and disagreed. I agreed that I had demons, but my demons were different from her definition of demons. So we kind of agreed. She gave me a Bible, some more Cullen skink, just in case. and off I continued. So if you picture the scene, I'm the east coast of Scotland. So I'm approaching Inverness now. And I've been walking for a few days again, and I met this chap driving on the road, and he said to me, I'm going to give you a lift. I said, well, thanks for asking, but, it's not the sort of thing I'm doing. So he said, no, I'm going to give you a lift because, look at your bag, for goodness sake. I said, no, I don't need a lift. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to a village called Crimond. And he went, all right, okay. He said, I live in Crimond. He said, it's 8 miles up that hill. I said, I'll be fine. I've walked hundreds already. He said, okay, well, I'll see you there. So 3 hours later, I get to Crimond, and I'm sort of footsore, and there's this guy, Kenny, and he's standing on what is a postage stamp of a village green, and he's going, I told you it was a long way, didn't I? I said, yes, Kenny, you told me it was a long way. Thank you for telling me that. That's great. He said, so what do you do now? What happens now? I said, well, if I've had donations, sometimes I'll stay in a bed and breakfast. If people have been following me on the internet, I'll sometimes stay in people's houses. But tonight, because I've got none of those things, I'm going to stick my tent up. Yeah, great. He said, you can stick your tent up in my garden. He said, and then I'll make you tea. I said, thanks very much. So we rushed round to his house. It was getting dark. So stuck my tent up in his garden, into his house. It was here that I felt like a complete hypocrite. My brother had recently bought himself a 40-inch plasma TV with surround sound in 3D. Now, all over the internet, I'd been saying, John, the world is in surround sound and feely vision, and it's beautiful, and it's lovely, and you can smell it, and it's gorgeous. I walked into Kenny's house, 40-inch plasma on the wall. Good Lord, moving pictures in a box, who'd have thought? I was just transfixed by this television. But I did have a conversation with him, and he did give me fish fingers and chips. And it was lovely. Again, guy who'd never met me before. So I go out to my tent, and I go to sleep. And the following morning, there's a little on my tent, and it's Kenny. And he says, I've made you breakfast. Tea and toast, but I have to go to work now. So I went, okay, Kenny, listen, it's been great. So Kenny goes off to work, and I look at my surroundings, and I suddenly realise I'm not in Kenny's garden. I'm in a communal drying area. And I'm not very close to Kenny's door. I'm actually 5 feet away from his next door neighbour's door. And I'm thinking, shit. And while I'm thinking that, I look up and this woman opens her door. And I'm thinking, what on earth is going through this lady's mind? She's just seen a guy camped in her garden. I mean, what would you guys do? Guy camped in your garden, what would you do? Call the police. Any further offers? Yeah, call the police. Yeah. So I start babbling to this woman. I said, Kenny said it'd be okay for me to camp here. I'm really sorry. I can get my tent down really quickly. And he said it was his garden. I didn't realise it was your garden. And she said, who? I said, Kenny, your next neighbour. She goes, I'm not interested in any of that. I said, what? She said, I've run you a bath. I was wondering if you wanted any bubbles in it. I said, bubbles would be good, thank you. So I went into this woman's house, bubble bath. So none of you thought bubble bath, did you? You mean bunch. So I had my bubble bath, and I said to this woman, what on earth made you run me a bath? She said, well, if I'd been camping, I'd been wandering around the place, the first thing I'd want is a bath. I said, but look at me, I look like I look dangerous. And she said, no, she said, I took a look at you, and you're obviously traveling around the place, you needed a bath. And we got chatting, and she told me that she'd been caring for a friend of hers who unfortunately recently died. And she was sad, obviously, and she said, I'm through caring now. I can't care for folk anymore. I said, you've just run a bath for a complete stranger. I don't think you've finished caring yet. So off I went. And off you went. Thanks very much. Do you guys need a break at all? You're okay? Okay, right. On to Inverness then, guys. So, we're walking along, and the weather's been great, and I've been incredibly fortunate. And there I am being hailed by phone, by text, by email, by the Fergusons. Friendly family who've originally from the same hometown as me, but I'd never met them. And they were coming to get me this particular day, and they were going to take me home for baths and whatnot, and they were going to drop me back on the road. And it was wonderful. They pulled up in their car next to me, and what is the etiquette? You feel you know these people, and yet you don't know these people. So obviously we hugged in a very non-British way, and they took me back to their house, fed and watered me, and sent me on my way. But it was just one of those kind of magical feelings that these people, and then they followed me to this day. Just seeing me around the whole of Scotland. So the following day, I'm walking. I do a lot of walking. And a guy, can you hear me? And a guy he's a policeman. And he says to me, what are you doing? So I tell him what I'm doing. He said, oh, you better watch out, you'll turn into one. What do you mean by that? He said, no, you'll turn into one. And I said, no, I am one. And he said, but you don't look like one. So what does one look like? Does that look like one? Now? All right, these are the creme de la creme. Yeah, these are great. How about now? Hold on, and yeah. See that's what one looks like. So I've got a horse's head, but I only use that for special occasions. So I tried to explain to him, that we all look like one. That mental ill health happens to 1 in 4 of us. That it's the biggest killer of men under 35 in the UK. That every year, more than 5,200 people take their own lives in the UK. 75% of those are men. Probably because we go around saying you don't look like one, and probably because we, when asked, how are you, we end up talking about Arsenal. But it was interesting that this chap was a policeman, because you come across people who you think ought to know better, and he didn't. But we had a conversation, and he was able to say, well, no, fair point. But the other thing is, all this mental ill health is going on, and only 13% of the NHS budget goes on mental ill health. 13%. I'm leading against an open door here. You guys probably know all that. So you're in a difficult position, and your service users are in a difficult position. It's a tricky world out there. Anyway, I walked on. Now I went over a bridge called the Keswick Bridge. Now the Keswick Bridge is a bit like the Forth Road Bridge, only it's solid. So I like the Keswick Bridge. And you look down and you see this beautiful expanse of water. And down there, I'm told, there are dolphins, seals, and all kinds of wildlife. I've been contacted by a woman who says, you must come and stay with me and my husband. We live a little way up the Beaulieu Firth, along a bonny wee path, she said. And just come along. So I was nearing her house, and we'd been texting each other. And she said, she got in touch and said, Chris, I'm not going to be there when you get to my house. So I just thought, I'm a Southern Jessie type. I thought I'll just sit outside her house and wait for her to come back. No, she wasn't having that. She said, just walk in the back door, help yourself to tea and toast, and take your hat off if you're wearing one, because the dog doesn't like hats. I was thinking, what, do you leave your doors unlocked? Would you be in touch with somebody and say, yeah, just go in and help yourself to my stuff? You don't feel that urge. I mean, you're still getting over the bubble bath, aren't you? So I went to this woman's house, and I walked into the house, and there's Sky, the dog. I'd taken my hat off, and Sky's the sweetest dog you've ever seen. Sort of mongrel type. It was just absolutely delightful. Very, very happy to see me. And and then Teen came home, and then her husband came home. We were all chatting, and he starts telling me, well, about all things wildlife. He's very knowledgeable about a lot of things. He's a very, very smart guy. But for some reason, he's telling me about an osprey, in great, great detail. And I'm thinking, an osprey is it's like hen's teeth. It's so rare. I don't know why you're bothering. Bye-bye. I don't know why you're bothering explaining that to me at all. I can't. Yeah. Anyway, later on, I'm up in the bedroom that they'd given me. I'm on the phone to my partner, Ella. And we're chatting away. And I'm saying, yeah, listen, they've been absolutely lovely. Yeah, really knowledgeable about wildlife, yeah. Do you know, they let me into the house without, they don't even lock the door. Yeah. Bloody hell! And while I'm bloody helling, suddenly there's this osprey comes down in the water in front of me, picks up a fish, flies off with it. And I'm thinking, I'm glad he told me. It's just amazing. And this is the world that I'd suddenly entered. So I'm a townie. I'm somebody who, I'd been walking for a long time, but I'm a townie who'd been walking for a long time. I'm somebody who's not, altogether together with wildlife. So when I see something like an osprey catching a fish, it was fantastic. So anyway, that was the wonderful osprey story. Well, while Ella's on the phone thinking that I'd just been murdered. So ever onwards. Now, the next part of the journey was a real physical endeavor. There's a road, the A9, that goes up the east coast of Scotland to a place called Wick. And Wick is my roots. My mum's from, mum was born there, my sister was born there, my brother was born there. I'm referred to often as the only Englishman in the family, which I can accept. So I was walking along this, and I was walking with the lovely Lou. And Lou, get that somebody. That'll be Lou. So I'm walking along with Lou. Oh, good. So I'm walking along with Lou, who's trying to sell me PIP. And Lou, as you recall, has MS. Now, you'd like to think that Lou would be walking slowly, or at least have the decency to walk as if she had some manner of disability. But unfortunately, Lou is tanking along. She takes what does she take? She takes medication for her MS. She takes painkillers and nerve blockers, and she's tanking along. She's absolutely flying along. So she's a very, very difficult woman to keep up with. So we get to this place called Nig. Now, Nig is a funny little place. It's just known for the Nig ferry. And we get there, and there's a ferry. Now, what would you imagine when you think of a ferry? Well, this thing kind of looked like it had been made in this guy's shed. It was just a few bits of metal tied together, and it didn't look like it should float. And the expanse of water that it covered was roughly from here to the back wall. But you couldn't get across there with your rucksacks and whatever. So Lou and I got onto the Nig ferry, and Lou immediately speaks on my behalf and says, "This man's walking around the edge of the UK, give him a free ride." And this guy said, "Listen, we're a small enterprise, we don't give anybody a free ride." So I'm about to pay when this German guy says, I'll pay, let me pay. So that was really kind. And we get chatting, and this German guy is cycling his way around Scotland. And we think nothing of it. He goes cycling off, and everything's lovely. About 2 weeks later, my filmmaker gets in touch with me. And she said that she'd been in a bar in Berlin. And she'd been talking to a friend of hers who had a friend. And this friend was asking Johanna, her name, what are you up to these days, Johanna? What are you doing? And Johanna said that she was filming me as I went around the UK. And this one went, "Oh my God." She said, "My boyfriend has just paid for him to go across on the Nig ferry." I mean, we've got 6 degrees of separation, but that's taking it a bit far. I mean, that was 2 degrees of separation takes me to Berlin. It was incredible. It was gobsmacking. Anyway, still with Lou, tanking on my way to Wick. I get to Wick. Now, when I'd been a child, Wick was a lovely sort of fishing town. It was thriving. It was a bustling place. Had a market, and the harbour was full of fishing boats and people working on nets and fixing their boats and lots of chat and noise. And I got there and it was dead. It was absolutely dead. There was a couple of Poundland shops and maybe another charity shop. And I walked into the marketplace and it's just nothing. So I went up to the harbour because I thought, it's a fishing town, for goodness sake. Nothing. There was one boat on the side that was a guy who was painting. There was an open-air swimming pool that my brother used to use. They called it the Trinky, and it was fed by the water from the sea. So people would go swimming in this swimming pool, pretending that it was a swimming pool and not actually the North Sea, and freeze to death and think they'd had a good time. But this had gone. This had been destroyed by the waters, and it was just a sad, sad scene. Very, very difficult. For me, what had been a thriving, bustling place, the soul had been ripped out of it. So I sadly walked through Wick, and I got probably about a mile outside, and I found Planet Tesco. And in Planet Tesco, that's where your Wick people were. Just thousands of people, they'd just been placed there. It's like they'd been beamed up and just stuck in Planet Tesco. And it just felt really sad. But that's happening all over the place. It's very difficult. So we're in the north of Scotland now. Okay. Anybody know John O'Groats? Anybody heard of John O'Groats? Anybody heard of the people doing charity rides from Land's End to John O'Groats? So I walk into John O'Groats and people go, yes, well done, that's fantastic, well done, that's great. And I'm going, I've just come from Edinburgh, really. I haven't walked that far. But I didn't want to upset them. So anyway, got to John O'Groats, but then I got to the top of Scotland, and I had a friend, Jim. Now, Jim was a guy who had been at the Crammon Brig Inn with me all that time ago. And he is what you call a technophobe. And his partner, his wife Maggie, no worries, his wife Maggie had given him a mobile phone. And this was a bit like giving Neanderthal man fire. He just, he didn't know what to do with it. And she said, she got in touch with me and said, Jim's on his way up to see you. He's on his way. So I was really excited. I was going to be walking with my friend Jim. So I hear that Jim's halfway up, and I tried to phone him. No chance. No, Jim doesn't know how to work his phone. So I'm walking along, and I'm in touch with his partner, who's in touch with somebody who knows Jim, who's following Jim, and tells Jim that where I am. And I look back, and imagine you've all got a friend who you've had this kind of spiritual connection with. You've got a really good mate who is a very close friend, and you can imagine them getting closer. You can feel it. You can feel their presence. So it was like that with Jim. I knew somehow that Jim was getting closer and closer. The reason being, he was driving a big truck. He had his hand on the horn, and he's had a head out the window going, Chris, Chris! So Jim appears in front of me, does a handbrake turn in his van, and gives me a big hug, and we're all very happy. He said, Chris, I'm going to have to carry your rucksack, because I'm not here just for decoration. So I give Jim my rucksack, and he immediately regrets it, because it weighs 65 pounds. So we walk, cheers. No pressure. So Jim, we walk a very short distance to a pub, and we get talking to a chap called David, who's an American, and he works for Deutsche Bank, and he's very friendly, and he said, you must come back and stay with us. He said, I've got a caravan, a static caravan outside my house, and what you can do is what you can do is you can stay in that. So me and Jim think, that's brilliant, fantastic. So we camp out that night. We'd had a few ciders, perhaps too many. And we get up in the morning feeling vaguely refreshed. And we wander off into the day. Now, Jim leaves all his stuff in the van because he doesn't need anything to sleep in, because we're sleeping at David's house. And we stride out, and it's a great day. And I say to Jim, so where does this David live? And he said, I thought you knew where David lived. I don't know where David lives. So we're walking along middle of nowhere. You know, there's a house every, 5 or 6 miles. And we're thinking, this is stupid. Do we go back and get your stuff, or what do we do? We see a man sitting in his garden, and we walk over to him and said, do you know David? And this guy goes, yeah, he lives in the hill over the back here. I'll take you there in a bit. And it was, can you imagine if somebody walked up to you here and said, do you know thingy? And you go, no, just leave me alone. So this guy says, oh, come and have a cup of tea. And Jim goes, no, we don't want to be any bother. I said, Jim, I've suddenly realized that I've learned to accept hospitality. Quite early on in my walk, I keep turning people down and say, no thanks, I'll be fine without it. But here's Jim turning down hospitality. I said, Jim, never turn hospitality down, never. So he accepts this cup of tea. And then this guy's wife comes along, and we get chatting. And she goes, oh, you must have some biscuits. And Jim's going, no, we don't want to be any bother. I'm going, Jim, for goodness sake, accept these biscuits. So this lovely man eventually walks us round over the top of this hill. And even still, there's this little voice at the back of my head saying, this guy's taking us over the hill. He could be taking us anyway. He's going to shoot us. So thankfully, he didn't shoot us. And we arrive at David's place, and he sort of guides us down, and we meet David. And David says, welcome, I've got a hot tub. He almost got to say the whole, I've got a hot tub. But by the time he'd finished the sentence, Jim was naked and in the hot tub. So he'd obviously got the idea of hospitality. There's nothing more surreal than sitting naked in a hot tub overlooking the Orkney Islands at the top of Scotland with a guy that you've never met before and a guy who you've known forever. It was just the weirdest thing. Later on, David says, so I'll make you some tea if you like. And Jim utters the famous lines, no, it's okay, we've got chocolate trifle. Jim, I don't want chocolate trifle for tea. And this guy made us a lovely salmon tea, and it was delightful. So we went to sleep in this static caravan, and this guy had a whole bunch of Scotty dogs, the black Scotty dogs. He had I think it was about 10 of them. And they acted as a quilt that night. They just piled in on top of us, and cheers now. They piled in on top of us like a big quilt, and it was just a fabulous time. So I'm at the top of Scotland, and I'm having to walk away from David's. Jim is going back home, and for the first time ever, I'm actually completely alone because there are no mobile phone masts. Now, with Ella, she checks to see if I'm crazy. She phones me 3 times a day. She checks to see if there's a change in my tone. She checks to see if I've dissociated. If I've dissociated, what she'll often do is she'll say, I'll book you a bed and breakfast, and I'll be up in 10, 12, 14 hours. And she'll come to my rescue. Now, suddenly, I was going into this land where there was nothing, and it felt reckless. I have this condition where I usually dissociate, give or take, once a month, and I was thinking, what do I do? And we decided that if the worst came to the worst, I'd just stick myself in a tent. I'd just wait for it to pass. Thankfully, during that walk, it didn't pass, but it got me thinking, what is a carer? I mean, you were talking about being a carer, and I think there are lots of definitions of what a carer might be. And, this kind of really long arm care. So the thing is, for me, it wasn't just Ella who was my carer. It was people on Facebook. It was people on Twitter. It was people who are following me. I think we hear a lot of bad things about Facebook and Twitter and how there's a lot of trolling that goes on. I think I haven't experienced very much of that. That on my Facebook page, that there's just been support. There's been one mega punch up, which was fantastic to watch, but really there hasn't been very very much. But here I was just alone, and it was the weirdest thing. Just walking along the north coast of Scotland, just looking north, and you know that the next thing. The next bit of land north is going to be either Iceland or the Arctic, and that feeling of isolation, but also that feeling of, I don't know, almost feeling at one with nature. And I've got to say, I did feel a bit sort of tree huggery. You know how the Native American Indians they see. Spirits in everything. They see spirits in trees, in rocks, and I could really begin to feel that kind of sensation. Ella came up to see me in Dennis, and it was great. She doesn't do camping. She once tried camping with me, and basically what she did was she got a memory foam mattress. She jammed it into my tent, and nothing else would fit inside the tent at all. So it was just me, her, and all my belongings outside. And we got up the following morning, she goes, well, that was rubbish, wasn't it? It was really uncomfortable. So I realised that she wasn't built for that kind of stuff, and bed and breakfast were the way ahead. But it was lovely to see her, because I hadn't seen anybody for days. And as I was approaching Dennis, it's amazing that there's almost the thrill you get when your phone suddenly makes all the pingy noises. Suddenly the world's there for you. Suddenly, and it's such a relief. And the first thing I got was a phone call from the campsite. Now the campsite told me that a woman called Jenny had paid for my campsite, my camp place. So that was an absolute thrill. And that took me back. I said, Jenny? Where did I see Jenny? And I suddenly realised that I'd seen Jenny a long time ago. And it had been on the Black Isle, which is sort of north of Inverness. And I'd been walking along the coastal path. And I'd spent the morning looking at the tidal times. And I decided that, I had plenty of time to get round this coastal path, and that I'd be able to get to the north of the Black Isle. And this woman who I was staying with in Jemimaville, what a lovely name for a place, Jemimaville. So I'd been staying with her, and we decided that there was plenty of time. So I'd walked about 6 miles, and I got to the end of the path. And there was a kind of cliff and a promontory, and I kind of looked around the corner, and I took a few steps on a few rocks, and I thought, I'm an idiot. The tide's come in. So I'd walked 6 miles. There's the tide. I couldn't go any further. And then I saw this ravine up to the left. And it was about 40 meters high, and just trees and stuff. And there was a whole bunch of nettles. And I realized, I'm in my nettle-proof kilt. So I thought, I'm going to go up that. That's where I'm going. I have the music to Indiana Jones playing in the back of my head. And I go charging up. And I'm swinging from branch to branch. And I find myself probably about halfway up. And I'm hanging onto a root. And I've got my foot stuck in a bit of mud. I'm thinking, I'm going to be on breakfast television with Lorraine Kelly going, an idiot fat bloke has been found hanging from a tree and had to be rescued by a helicopter. So I sheepishly sort of worked my way down, and I thought, gosh, I'm going to have to walk all the way back. So I walked all the way back to this campsite, and I was sitting just looking at my legs. And in Scotland, people talk about midges. I imagine you've not been to Scotland, many of you, and the Scottish midge is a monster. It's about 1 millimetre long, maybe 2 millimetres long, and it eats you. It just does. If you look at a block of ground, cheers. If you look at a cubic metre of ground, 300,000 of these little blighters live in there, and they suck your blood. So, but nobody tells you about ticks. So I'm sitting there at this campsite, and I'm covered in ticks. Now, again, I'm a townie. I've never had a tick in my life. And I'm looking at my legs, and I'm thinking, it's about 100 of these little blighters just tucking into me. So what would you do? You're finding these alien creatures sucking your blood. What would you do? Cigarette? Yeah, yep. You're saying you burn them off? Lighter? A stern letter? Pull them. Well, I went on the internet because I'd heard somewhere in the back of my head that Lyme's disease comes from ticks. And I had some notion that the worst symptom of Lyme's disease, do any of you know about Lyme's disease? The worst symptom of Lyme's disease? Death. So I thought, I don't want death. So I'm looking at this, and I begin to panic. I'm thinking, oh, for goodness sake, I've got these things on my legs. And I looked at it further, and it said only 65 people in Scotland had Lyme's disease in the past year. So I thought, fantastic. So I just start scraping these blighters off, and it's like a firework display as they all sort of pop. And it's just delicious. So I'm sitting swearing to myself, and I'm suddenly aware that there's this woman standing next to me. In one hand, she's got a cup of tea. In one hand, she's got a bowl of sugar. She went, do you take sugar? Yeah, that'd be lovely. Thank you. I'll take sugar. Thank you. It suddenly felt like a teenage boy at his mum's house, at his friend's mum's house. Go, yes, Mrs. Brown, it's been lovely. Yeah, thank you for having me. So she was just delightful. So this woman, she'd filled me full of hope that particular day, because not only did she provide me with a cup of tea, she said, we live in North Devon. When you pass through North Devon, you can come and stay in our lovely cottage. And we've got lots of friends in North Devon. And that gave me hope, because that particular day where I'd just had enough, and I'd walked 12 miles and got absolutely nowhere. And suddenly, here's a woman offering me accommodation in North Devon. So that was just delightful. So back in Durness, Ella's come up, and we've got the bed and breakfast. And I think I speak for all the women here when I know what ladies like. It's like they like hearing, darling, I think I might be tick-free. Yeah. Yeah, she was appreciative. So so anyway, Ella went away. It was lovely having her, but it's always sad when she goes. And this next part of the journey was probably the most, I wouldn't say it's desolate, because Scotland is beautiful, but it's the most lonely part. And again, there I was walking with no mobile phone coverage, with nothing. So I walked for about 5 days. I hadn't seen anybody. And there's this woman who's walking along the side of the road. Suddenly I was David Attenborough. I'd found a tribe of woodmen in the middle of the Amazonian forest. I'm on her. And you could see her going, oh, God. And I said, hello, who are you? What are you doing? Where are you from? Where are you going? And she's going, I'm just going along. Now, the Western Highland accent is lovely. It's almost like a song. I'm just going along the road. And but she's very gentle with me as I'm in her face like this. And where are you going? And what's in your shopping bag? And And finally, I realized that I was a bit too much in her face and that really I ought to be backing off. And she was very gentle with me. But it just showed me just how much do we need people? How much do we need company? How much do we just need to have folk around us? Because we are really social animals. So I left this poor woman shocked and stunned, probably telling her friends that this lunatic had attacked her. And then I saw a sign. It was just fantastic to see. It was just a beautiful thing. This sign. It said the Elfin Tea Rooms. I was starving. I hadn't seen a group of people for ages. I hadn't seen people for ages, and I was so excited that I was going to go and have a hot drink, and I was going to have sandwiches and goodness knows what else. So I went tanking off. That must have been in excess of a mile an hour, and I finally arrived at these Elfin Tea Rooms, and there were people outside the tea rooms, and they're all standing there like this. I just barged past them because I want food, I want people, I just want to be amongst my own. And these are really kind people. They're saying, right, in you come, sit down. And they kept on feeding me, and they gave me loads of stuff from my backpack and said, well, we're only going to throw this away at the end of the day anyway. And they just gave me loads of stuff for free. Again, people that I didn't know being gratuitously hospitable. So I get talking. I said, look, I've loved, northwest Scotland. It's been absolutely stunning. I've seen a lot of deer, and I've seen all kinds of things. And I said, but I haven't seen a golden eagle. And they said, what do you think we were looking at when you went barging past us on your way in? I went, golden eagle? Yeah, it was soaring around. Oh, really? So I went back and I walked along the road, but I knew this was golden eagle country. And suddenly I was aware of this flying wardrobe next to me. And it was about 8 feet off the ground, and it was followed by another flying wardrobe. And you can't get over how big these birds are. They're humongous. And they were banking and chasing each other. It was like they were playing. And I was thinking, at last, here we are. I walked a bit further, and there was a golden eagle, and it was surfing on a thermal on the side of a hill. And I can't describe just how stunning it was. So I took some photographs, and I don't know if you've ever seen those really bad UFO photos. Well, that's exactly what mine looked like. So nobody would ever believe that I'd seen anything. So it was just a brilliant, brilliant day. And I walked further, and I'm feeling buoyant, so happy. And in Scotland, you've got this law, which is the right to roam, which means you can stick your tent up anywhere as long as it's 20 metres from somebody's residential home. The crime in Scotland is if you cause criminal damage. So I think it's a great law. I love it. It kept me going all the way around Scotland. But there, in the middle of nowhere, is an old ruined castle. So I was king for a day. I stuck my tent up next to the castle, and all the sheep were my subjects. Actually, that reminds me of a story. Ella was up with me while she was up in Durness, and it was then I realised that I'd been out in the wilds too long, because she and I were, and this is something I know ladies don't like. I was walking along with her, and we looked over at this field, and in this field was a sheep, and I turned to Ella. I said, you've got to admit she's pretty. Ella disagreed. So anyway, back down. King of the castle, feeling fantastic. Really just one of those great, great days. I've been fed, watered, eagles, castle. What could be better? I'm on my way to a place called Ullapool. And Ullapool is a fishing village that I went to when I was 12, and I had really fond memories of it. And it was beautiful, beautiful place. So I managed to get to the outskirts of Ullapool, and I camped out, and the following morning I dissociated. And it was then I realised, what an absolute pain in the arse my mental health problem is. So Ella phones me. I'm in my tent, completely spaced out, really not knowing what to do with myself. I can't go outside the tent. I feel bad. I can't do anything. I've got my radio. I've got my sleeping bag. I've got my rucksack. I can't go out. So Ella phones and she says, you've dissociated, haven't you? And I said, yeah. I'm thinking, I've dissociated in a really inconvenient place. And she said, I can't get up and see you today. I can't help you today. She said, I'm going to phone Lou. Now Lou lives near Edinburgh, and Lou drives up, and it's something like, I don't know, 300 miles to Ullapool to come to my rescue and stuff all my things in her bag into the back of her car. All the time I'm just absolutely spaced out. I think I'm quite easy to handle. I'm very obedient. You know, people just say, sit in the car, just shut up, take your pills, you'll be all right. So she took me down to Cowdenbeath, which is just north of Edinburgh. Ella drives up from Warwickshire, come and get me. And that's what, I think that's what a carer's relationship is this kind of, I don't know, coming to your rescue-ness. This kind of, and also me knowing that she'd come to my rescue, I think is a great thing. So I went back to Ella's house, and I didn't feel great. And I felt like I'd gone from one episode of dissociation into another. And I thought while I was down there, I'd get my tent and I'd put it in her garden to air, because after a while of camping, your tent starts to smell a bit like a dead dog. So I put it in the garden to air. And 2 days later, I thought, right, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to bring the tent back in. I couldn't go outside. I couldn't. I opened the door. I can't go outside. I think it's crazy. I had a panic attack. Now, I've never had a panic attack in my life. I've never had agoraphobia in my life. And I'm thinking, right, from my degree days in psychology, I'm thinking agoraphobia, agora, marketplace, phobia, fear of the marketplace. And I think this, people generally don't fear going outside. It's people they fear. It's the interaction with folk they fear. Yeah, I was afraid to go outside. So I was stuck. So this went on for a while, and I was thinking, this is just another part of my mental health problem. Yeah, I'm just another bit crazy. There's another bit of nuts. It's it'll pass. And Ella's put me in front of loud cop shows again, and it'll pass. And we kind of got to a point where it felt like it had passed. And I'd been off the road for a while, so we thought, I need to go back, sort of do a bit of training to get myself back in. Now, by this time, Hubert had arrived. All my friends had been nagging me for ages. Stop carrying a huge weight through your back, get yourself a trailer. So finally got myself a trailer. Hubert was with me. So we tried Hubert on the West Highland Way, Lou and I. And I realised, normally I'm quite pathological about preparing and making sure that I've got everything and making sure that I've got all the equipment I need. And we'd start walking, Lou and I would start walking on the West Highland Way, and I realised that I didn't have the little gizmo that tightens Hubert's nuts. Now, last thing you want is Hubert's nuts coming loose on the West Highland Way. But while we were walking, I was unable to eat. I could drink a little, but I was unable to eat. And we walked further, and I was retching, and I felt very dizzy. And finally we'd walked 60 miles that day, with me finishing the walk by lying on the path. The world was spinning around me. I couldn't do anything. And Lou's going, come on, let's get to the hostel at least. And we managed to somehow get to the hostel. And I spoke to Ella and I told her, what was going on. She came up with this brilliant idea. Go and see a doctor. So I wisely went to see a doctor. She booked me in. So I went to see a doctor in this place in the middle of nowhere, and I spewed forth all my symptoms, the dizziness, the sickness. Also told him about my borderline personality disorder. Told him everything I could. And he did a few tests on me. He went, "You're a spotter, aren't you?" Does anybody know what a spotter is? It's a secret shopper for GPs. So he thought I was a mystery shopper. So I'm going, no, these are my symptoms. This is all going on for me. So he said, right, okay, well, walk with some baby steps. So I walked with little baby steps and I fell over. He said, stand up and close your eyes. So I stood up and closed my eyes. I fell over. And he said, I can't see anything wrong with you. All right, fine, okay, right. So I went back to the hostel and I said to Lou, this man who asked me to write a good report about him told me that there's nothing wrong with me. And Lou said, well, I want to do the rest of the West Highland Way. I'm off. So off she went, leaving me at the hostel. Ella, God bless her, once again comes to my rescue, picks me up, drives me back to sunny Warwickshire. You know, what a great service. So I'm back at Ella's house and I'm feeling really unwell, but I'm just thinking, this is me just being mental. This is just, my mental health problem has gone out of control. Maybe I've just took more medication. You know, I take quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic, as you probably know, and I was just taking more and more of it, and I was just feeling quite dozy and, you know, not connecting with the world. So with all the dizzy spells and stuff, we came up with this other brilliant idea, go and see a doctor. So I went to see the doctor again, and he said, I think you've got an inner ear infection. And while I was talking to him, I suddenly made this connection that I'd been savaged by ticks. And I thought, I wonder if this is Lyme disease. So this guy goes, no, it can't be Lyme disease. No, nobody gets Lyme disease. And as I was walking out the door, he said, don't worry, not many people die of Lyme's disease these days. So obviously felt very reassured. So 2 weeks later, after taking all these pills, I finally get to the point where I'm thinking, no, this isn't working. Went back to the doctors, got a diagnosis of Lyme disease, got whisked off to Coventry Hospital, pumped full of antibiotics, and got kind of cured. Now, it put me, this sort of whole episode, it took me, you know, when we were talking about self-stigma earlier on, how quick I was to point that finger at me and say, you know, this is just me being more loony. This is me being more crazy. What do I do? You know, what is this? What is this? A physical illness? Is this a mental illness? What is it? And it reminded me of a friend of mine who had borderline personality disorder as well, and she went to a hospital in Edinburgh, and her symptoms were she had blue lips, and she had difficulty breathing, and she went to the doctor and she said she was in casualty, and they sent her to a cubicle, and within half an hour she was sitting with a couple of psychiatrists, and these two psychiatrists said, listen, there is no cure for borderline personality disorder. You really just need to get home. They'd obviously looked at her records, went, you're loopy, go home. So she went back to her house. Thankfully, her friend was there who said, your lips are blue, get back to hospital. And she took her back to hospital, and it turns out she had blood clots on her lungs, and you know she was very close to dying. But it's very, what I'm saying is, it's not just medical professionals, it's all of us who are quick to say, hold on, is this madness, this self-stigma, you know, what is it? Is this just people playing up? Especially borderline personality disorder, you probably know, you know, people immediately think you're being manipulative, you know, self-harming, you know, and that's another experience that I've had. Now, a lot of my friends have borderline personality disorder, and they, like me, have self-harmed. Now, my choice of self-harming ranges from cutting to punching myself in the face. punching myself in the face isn't terribly sensible because it's a bit like tickling yourself. You think you can't tickle yourself, so you think you can't actually knock yourself out. But I've knocked myself out on a number of occasions. But it's just something that it's a horrible drive. Why do you think people self-harm? Sorry? What was that? Change the focus.
I think it's that release of adrenaline, that excitement to get that thing out of the system.
Sort of release of endorphins, kind of. Yeah, I've got to say I've heard a lot of reasons. Most of my friends who self-harm, they manage it themselves. So this notion of it being attention seeking, and I'm sure at times it is attention seeking, but we're all attention seekers. It's just that some of us do it in different ways. And I suppose, if you self-harm, you can say, you can't see what's going on inside my head, but take a look at that. Look at the marks on my arm. That's what it feels like to me. My self-harming is really, it's happened during dissociative episodes where I've just wanted to feel anything. Just let me feel anything. As I say, a lot of my friends will look after themselves, and they'll tidy up their own stitches. They'll do butterfly stitches on themselves, and they very seldom go to A&E because A&E very often just isn't equipped for that kind of thing, because very often there's not mental health nurses there. Very often it's your general nurses who don't have a wide knowledge of mental health problems. And I've heard stories of people going and doctors stitching them up without any anaesthetic, saying, you want pain? I'll give you pain. And stitching people up. And that's the whole thing about self-harm. You want self-harm there and then. You don't want it later. You want it, you want it when you want it. And for me, it is the weirdest thing. I haven't self-harmed for a year. And there are still days when I really feel like self-harming. And it's like not drinking when you're thirsty. It's like not eating when you're hungry. It's an absolute incredible compulsion. You just really, really want to do it. But for me, if I punch myself in the head, we're looking at brain damage down the road. So I'm doing my best not to do it. Alternatives like getting an elastic band and pinging it on your wrist doesn't really do the job. It's a nice idea, but the vast again, nearly all the people I've spoken to, that doesn't even touch it. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about that self-harm thing, and that I think there's many reasons for self-harming as there are self-harmers. I once attended a group for people who self-harmed, and it'd been very cold up in Edinburgh, so there was a lot of ice around the place. And a friend of mine was running the group, and a lot of people hadn't quite made it to the group. And at the end of the group, we're all going on our way. It'd been very, very useful. And she said, listen, if people can't make it next time, don't beat yourself up. I said, Naomi, are you listening to what you're saying? So back in the road, I'm feeling better. I've had my medication. I'm going down south, and I'm going to a place called Applecross. Now, Applecross is so in the middle of nowhere. It's incredible, but there's the Applecross Inn. Now, I'd had donations, and I had a massive £50 about my person. And I was approaching the Applecross Inn, and I thought, I'm going to have a bed and breakfast. So I went along, met Judy, the woman who ran the place, and said, any chance of bed and breakfast? She said, it's £45. I went, fantastic. So she said, you want a place with a bath? Yes, I want a room with a bath. So I had sort of 73 baths, and then came down for the lager shandy that I'd been craving all day. And because I told people my story, suddenly people were buying me tea. and they bought me my dinner, and they bought me drinks, and I was like somebody's long lost friend. It was just lovely. And I told them how I'd been walking along the road with Hubert and how it'd just been incredible place. And I'd encountered some wildlife that I hadn't encountered on my journey so far. The Highland cow. Have you ever seen a Highland cow on a postcard? Aren't they beautiful? Just big, shaggy beasts. Well, these ones were about 2 inches away from me, and they're looking at Hubert, and they're going, I'm going to have you. And I'm terrified, and they're looking after the young, and so I managed to somehow sneak my way past them. Anyway, back at the Applecross Inn, had 27 bass. No worries. No, cheers just now. So I'm at the Applecross Inn, and these guys are looking after me, and I go down the following morning, and I'm waiting for Judy to come down, and I've got my £45 ready to give to her, and she said that it's no charge. I saw you. She said it's no charge. I went, really? And she said, yeah. And she said, are you staying for another night? I said, if you like. She said, yeah. If you stay for another night, we're having a raffle for you, and we're going to raise money for your journey in the raffle. So that night, I found myself sitting with some guys who kept on having one for the road. Scottish people are very good at having one for the road. They roughly start having one for the road at about 6 o'clock, and they just keep pouring drink down your neck until about 12. I was hammered. So they raised £157 for me at this place, and they said, this will see you on your way down to, because you'll need other bed and breakfasts on your way. I said, right, okay, that's fantastic. So £157 plus the 45. I was the wealthiest man alive. So I walked further down, and I got to the Isle of Skye. Now, the Isle of Skye is beautiful. You're walking along the west coast of Scotland, and suddenly there's this huge lump of land coming out. There's the Coolin Mountains that razor sharp against the blue sky. Absolutely stunning. And I'm thinking, how lucky am I to be doing this? So I get to the Isle of Skye, and this is the first time I've encountered fast-moving vehicles for a long time. And these guys, it's like people from towns who suddenly want to go on holiday, but they want to go on holiday really quickly, and they want to have a very fast weekend break, and then away again. And I'm walking on the side of the road thinking, these guys are going to kill me. I find a little quiet road going down the middle of Skye, and I'm walking along, and it's getting darker and darker. Now, you'd think on a big island like that, with the right to roam, there'd be plenty of places for me to put my tent. Not so, because there's heather all over the place. Now, heather, sort of as a plant, raises up about 2 feet off the ground, so you can't put your tent down. So I'm walking along, and it's getting darker. I'm walking along, it's getting darker. I'm suddenly aware this guy in a huge chopper motorbike goes past me. And then back again. And then back again. I think this is sinister. And then suddenly he appears in front of me, bumps up onto the verge in front of me, jumps off his bike, sticks his hand out, shakes my hand, and said, "Are you as mad as me?" I probably am. And he told me that his name was Mad Bob. And so I said to Mad Bob, I said, I'm looking for somewhere to stick my tent up. And he said, right, okay, you walk along the road just about another half mile. There's a little track that goes into the woods. And you go into the woods, you walk for another half mile, and there's a piece of grass, and you can put your tent up, you'll be just fine. So, Mad Bob, he goes racing off, and Mad Bob has followed me ever since, we have lots of banter ever since. But as I'm walking in the woods, I'm suddenly aware that I'm in a horror B movie. I've just taken directions from a man called Mad Bob. It's pitch black. I can't see anything, and I'm thinking, I'm going to be murdered to death any second now. And I walk a bit further, I look to my right, and there's this piece of grass that he promised me. And I'm thinking, I'm in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere. And there's two guys from Wolverhampton going, all right, how's it going? So it was lovely to see these guys. And it was just weird. And they were cycling around Scotland, and we got chatting, and we put our tent up, and then we all went on our way. But it was a most wonderfully weird experience. So 80 people live on this island. Now, interestingly, an awful lot of them have got cars, but none of them are taxed, and none of them have got MOTs. And mysteriously, whenever they hear the policeman's coming over on the ferry, all these cars just mysteriously vanish. Anyway, I was going to meet the woman who was the head of the council there, and I took a little wander along, and I met her granddaughter. Now, her granddaughter was a girl about 10 years old, and she comes skipping up to me and she said, I want my granddad to get some pigs. So I'm still a townie. I'm still somebody who thinks Peppa Pig. When you think little girl pigs, you think Peppa Pig. So I go, oh, lovely. So why do you want your granddad to get you some pigs? To eat them. Okay. So I met this woman, and I thought, to live on the Isle of Egg, I thought it'd be some kind of complicated application process, because it's such an idyllic place. It's beautiful. And this woman, who was the head of the council, said, no. See that house over there? And there was a house that was kind of half built. She goes, that was a guy who rowed his boat over from the Isle of Rum, which is another island, and he just stayed. I said, and that's what happened. People know, if egg is right for them. And she said, so you come and stay or you don't. I thought that was just incredible, because I thought, there'd be forms to fill out and all kinds of malarkey. So she sent me to a place called Knoydart, which is like an island, but it's a small village on the mainland, but you can only get to there by boat. And I met the ranger there. Now this chap, he'd worked in London all his life, and he was a graphic designer, and he used to get on the train in the morning, he'd go to work, and he just lived the London life. And I said to him, you've come here to get away from people, haven't you? You're hiding away from people. And he said, you don't move to a place like this to get away from people. He said, everybody knows your business here. Everybody knows who I am. Everybody knows what I do. Everybody knows what time I'm up. Everybody knows what time I go to bed, and everybody knows that I was pissed in the pub the other night. He said, if you live in London, you can get on the train, you can go to work. You can get back on the train, come home from work. You're surrounded in 9 million people, and you don't speak to any of them. He said, no, this is definitely a place where you don't hide away from people. And the other thing he told me was that as a ranger, he does guided tours around the mountains around the back of Knoydart. And he told me about one guy who'd had this huge rucksack. And in this huge rucksack, he said, you can't carry this around the mountains. You never get up the hill. And he started taking things out, and he just had a lot of rubbish. And at the bottom of it, he had a 12-inch bayonet. He said, well, what do you want this 12-inch bayonet for? He's going, well, you don't, we'll be up in the hills. You've got no idea who we'll meet. He said, I know exactly who we'll meet. We'll meet nobody. So that was Knoydart, but it's just, again, it's island life. It's something that you just need to experience. It's just so lovely. A lot of people have said that when I get to England, it's going to be a bad thing. I'm not going to get the same hospitality. I'm not going to get people looking after me. So I'm going to finish off with a story about my adventure into England and just how it works. Now, there's no right to roam in England, so I have to ask people if I can stick my tent up, or I have to hide. Now, I was on the Wirral, which is just south of Liverpool, and there was this park that I knew of, and in this park there were park rangers, and they lived in this little hut, and so I went over to ask permission. Said, can I camp on your beautiful land? And he said, no. I said, but I've been walking around the edge of the UK. It's been fantastic, and everybody's been so kind and hospitable. He said, no, you can't. I can't authorize it. So I thought, well, I said to him, well, this is the first time this has ever happened. I'm stuck. He said, well, it's not my problem. So I said, okay. So I told him a few of my stories, and he said, well, there's a static caravan site just next to us. He said, I'll phone them and see if it's okay for you to stick your tent up there. So I thought, well, what the heck, give him a ring. So he gave him a ring, and they said, yeah, come round. And then obviously he felt a bit guilty because he started saying to me, after 5 o'clock, there will be nobody here. After 5 o'clock, we'll all be gone, meaning you can camp here if you like. So I thought, right, I'm not going to camp there because I want to meet these people who are offering me somewhere to stay. So I went round to this static caravan site, and I got talking to this guy who looked not unlike John Bishop. Great, smile bigger than his head. And he said, I'm going to have to speak to the committee to see if you can camp here. So the first guy he speaks to, oh, really easy, yeah, you can stay, that'll be fine. The second guy, altogether more sticky. So the conversation is going, no, yeah, no, there's nothing wrong. No, he's not one of them. No, he's not mad. No, he's raising, yeah, it'll be fine, yeah. So he puts his phone down. I said, I'm going to have to make you out to be a liar. I said, I am one of them. So he said, oh, okay, well, you can put your tent up around the back of the social club anyway. I felt like I was kind of winging it a bit, and it all felt a bit uncomfortable. So I put my tent up and I kind of hid away, and it all felt unsatisfactory. But at 11 o'clock at night, there was a little sort of movement outside my tent, and I heard this young girl's voice, and she's saying, I thought he was going to come in. And her mum says, he's walking around the edge of the UK, he's obviously tired. I thought he was going to come in, I want to have a chat with him. With that, I sort of woke up and I said, no, I'll come in, let's have a chat. And before I knew it, I was surrounded people were drinking lager shandy, and I found myself sitting next to the guy who'd been really sticky about me coming in. And he was looking at me, and he gradually realised that I didn't have a little trapdoor on my forehead where a cuckoo came out. And he listened to me, I listened to him, and I listened to him about the fears that he had. And we just got chatting, and we just had a lovely evening. And his daughter, who was this girl, she came up to me, and she'd gone away with her mum, and she came back, and she said to me, "What do you like?" I don't think I understand the question. She said, "No, what do you like?" I said, I don't know what you mean. She said, do you like salt and vinegar, ready salted or smoky bacon? Do you like orangeade or do you like shandy bass? So I said, shandy bass and plain crisps wouldn't go amiss, thanks very much. So this little girl, 12 years old, 10 years old, whatever she was, comes back with these goods. And I'm looking at her mum, I'm going, I can't take this from your daughter. She goes, no, she thinks you're great. She thinks you're fantastic. And she just wants to help you on your way. I said, that's really kind. And then she rifles in her pocket this little girl. She said, and I've got 30 pence left. And she gives me this 30 pence. And Mum's saying, it's fine, she's been working on the bingo all night. And she wants you to have it. And I was just blown away. I was just thinking the contrast of what I thought was an absolute car crash at the beginning of that evening, where I was told I couldn't actually camp anywhere, to suddenly I'm being looked after by a young girl who's making sure I've got shandy bass and ready salted crisps. But that's kind of been the way the walk has been, and I think that hopefully I've demonstrated a bit of that people, if you approach people face to face and say, this is mental health, this is mental ill health, and this is what it looks like. We're not the things you see on CSI. We're not the things you see in the Daily Mail. This is it. People will open their minds. People will invite you back to their house. People will look after you. And I'm convinced that people will continue to look after me around the edge of Wales, down into Cornwall, and all the rest of it. Thanks for listening to me, folks.